Hello and welcome to the Pages of Light podcast, your destination for discussions of popular fantasy and science fiction novels from a Christian worldview. My name is Tyler, aka Verum, and with me as always is Gabriel, aka the... Wait, hold on. That's not Gabe. Who is that?
Hey, Gandalf the Grey at your service, Sir Verum.
Gandalf the Grey. Do you
I've
have any...
hijacked the podcast this evening.
All right,
I don't know how Gandalf talks.
I assume you're gonna have some fireworks for us, some really banger hot takes or something.
You know, my staff is at home.
Oh, you left it.
I can't seem to remember where I left it. Maybe Shadowfax has the answer. We don't know. Well,
remember, when in doubt, remember, you just have to follow your nose. So.
Yes, I have a good sniffer.
That's right.
For those of you on the podcast and who are completely confused at this point, I am wearing a full beard and gray hair. So if you're on the podcast and you want to see what this looks like, check out the YouTube channel.
There you go.
Yes.
Plug for the YouTube.
Quite a glorious, Halloween's just around the corner from the time of our recording, and my daughter is going to be in 2 parades, and then there's Halloween night, so I got to have something to wear. This will do well, I think.
Very good. It's always nice to have a very popular fantasy character guest star on our podcast, so hopefully Gandalf will make another return appearance at some point. So we'll see what happens.
We aim to please.
Maybe if we do Lord of the Rings books, he'll stay for a whole episode. We'll see.
Oh, yes. That'd be good. I need to watch it so I can get some of his speaking cadence down. It'd be good.
Yeah, you need to channel your inner Sir Ian McKellen, the one and only Gandalf.
Very true. Very true.
All right. But yes, Gabe, aka the Quarantine Quartermaster, is here with me today, as always. If you want to check out Pages of Light content, you can check us out on social media. As Gabe mentioned, the YouTube channel. You can go on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those things. And you can also go to pagesoflight.com and see what's happening over there. So yeah, welcome back to the podcast, Gabe. How you doing today? How you feeling about part 2?
Part 2 is good. I just enjoy the story. This story is so different from the first. It's, when you read a good book, you want the next phase to be the same as the first one, just more of it. And
sure.
Then you have to I think of Stranger Things, season 1 was this kind of horror,
right.
Story, and they returned to that in the final season, and man, is that good.
Yeah.
And then, but the second season, it's not like that, and then the third season, it's different. But they came back to their roots in the last season, so it was really cool.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, we're going to be doing part 2 of the Crimson Campaign. So in the last episode, we started the book and then we stopped after chapter 21. And so in this episode, we're going to be doing the rest of the book. So 22 until, I think there's 44 chapters and then an epilogue. Mm-hmm. So that's what we'll be doing. And yeah, that's going to be the general plan. And we'll talk about the book. We'll overview some of the different character plots. And then at the end, at least I'll talk about book 3 predictions, or what I'm hoping to see in the last book. Gabe can think about how not to spoil anything or not provide any hints for me because he has already read the book. But yeah, so it'll be good.
I will say that's the book. I feel like I've listened to these first 2 books 4 times, and I feel like I've only listened to the other one maybe once or twice, and
yeah.
I'm very fuzzy on it. I knew the basic plot lines for these 2, and I know one big thing that's going to happen in the 3rd book, but again, I just don't have the best memory. So there you go.
Yeah, I don't either. Once I finish a book, after probably a week, 2 weeks, I start to get pretty fuzzy on the individual details or plot points. I'll remember the big things that happen, of course, are like big character moments and stuff, but all the nitty gritty details just kind of slowly seep out of your brain. And we're talked
like
about that on the
high school students.
Yes, we talked about that on the last episode you gave us. What was that psychology term you used last episode?
The tip of the tongue phenomenon.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Knowing something that exists in your long-term memory but lacking the proper retrieval cue to get it out of there.
Right, yes. So I'm sure all of those details exist in my long-term memory, but I don't know how to get there. So, yes.
But I was going to say, we're like high schoolers. There, it's like, it's just like every test. You cram for the test, you know it for the test, and then you get on the other side of the test, and you're like, yeah, I don't really remember all that. You get to the final exam, you're like, yeah, I'm going to need to go back and look at that.
Yep. But a good thing this is not a test. This is just a podcast, a discussion among friends, and we're glad that you're here to join us and discussion of part 2 of the Crimson Campaign. Hopefully you've enjoyed our discussion of this series so far, and we will be doing the last book in the series. I don't know, maybe in 2 months or so.
Couple months.
I don't know. Yeah. We'll see.
We'll see where it lands. Well, Tyler, I have to say, I did not prepare a quote for this week, so what did you choose?
All good. Yeah, my quotes. I feel like I had a harder time finding a quote in this one than I've have in previous books. But the one I did pick it's from Mahali on page 434, if you have the paperback. He's talking to Taniel. And he says, I understand that killing is your profession, but every loss of life is great. And this was around a conversation of Taniel saying, like, there was some explosion and a bunch of Kez people died. And Taniel was like, that's not a very great loss because they're Kez and they're the enemy or whatever. But Mahali's point was like, it wasn't the soldiers. It was, laundresses, cooks. Like, it was just in a non-military part of the base. And so, it's not a great loss, right? It's not a good thing. So yeah, that just made me think of like war in general is not just the soldiers that are affected. It's all the people that are in the countries where the war is happening. And there's lots of effects beyond that. And, people die in wars that have no dog in the fight. They're just innocent bystanders. And, they just happen to be in the line of fire for that particular time. And yeah, so war is just terrible. And that was just...
I think about, when you say that, I think about like dropping the nuclear bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, Fat Man and Little Boy, and just all the lives lost that were non-military and civilian. Right. And I think that's a really good quote to kind of challenge us that, we are all trying to get to heaven. Like those, I find it funny. Like I've had friends in the past who like their entire life is like, where did you go to high school? Oh, like our high school, like football teams were rivals. So therefore we cannot be friends sort of thing. And then it just continues. It's like, oh, where'd you go to college? Oh, you went to Penn State. Oh, I can't be friends with you. I'm a Buckeye, and then it's just like, you have all these things that are like, here domestic, like in our country, and then it moves to like the international, Adro versus Kez. But like in reality, it's who's going to heaven, and like let's save everyone that we can to go to heaven, because there's going to be two sides on the other end of death. We're either going to go to heaven or we're not. Yep. Forever. And I don't know about you, but I've had like 2 years of my life feel like forever. So I don't want forever to feel like forever if I'm not in heaven. That's, that's part of the reason I've come to the light, is just being scared of the dark.
Yeah, that's a big motivating factor, I think, for people. But yeah, I just thought that was a good quote, just a reminder of, no loss of life is good. Even if you think like someone deserved it, like, there's still no longer here on the earth. That's not to say that there's not room for, in the justice system, like capital punishment or stuff like that. I don't know your opinion on that. Well, we don't have to get into that. But yeah. So yeah, I just thought that was a good quote.
Yeah, you picked a good one.
Cool. Yeah, so now we'll just jump into some book discussion. So I think to start off, we're going to do Adamat and Nyla's story because they're kind of together in Adapest and doing some things. And then we'll jump to Taniel, and then we'll finish off with Tamas because Tamas kind of has like the big last final battle, hurrah. That's the kind of the big climactic thing towards the end of the book. So
yeah, Alvation.
Yes, at Elevation. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to kick us off with Adamat and Nyla? So the big thing that happens at the beginning of this section is the raid on Lord Vetus's house, and yeah, I just thought that was a really cool scene. Just how he described everything, and just especially when he was describing like how the privileged were fighting each other, and just like the sheer amount of power and chaos that is happening and all of that. And yeah, it was just really cool. What did you think about that?
Oh yeah, the opening salvo with Bo just like he's like working his sorcerer's gloves, and then like the side of the house just like falls off, and you're looking like at a cross section of like all the like everyone is like, what is going on? And then it just like devolves into pandalirium. I know that's not a word, but I say it sometimes.
Pandemonium.
Yeah. And yeah, I thought that was just a really cool scene. And then when Bo gets Vetus, oh man, he just like rips his arms off. No.
Yeah, that was that's probably one of the most gruesome scenes in the series so far, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets pretty brutal. Like, and then he like cauterizes the wounds so that like Vetus will survive, so that he can be put to the question. Yeah. And yeah, that was a pretty brutal scene. And then, is there a part of you who is like, Vetus got what he deserved?
Oh yeah, for sure, because he was like this like evil, conniving kind of character who was selling kid stuff to the slavers, and yeah, he's just no good.
Yeah, he is. He's a vile human being.
Yeah, so yeah, a piece of me does feel like he got what he deserved. Yeah, just that scene is just like him. I had to like read that part twice because I like, hold on, did he really just do that? I was almost shocked of like
fast.
Yeah, I like read through it and I was like, wait a second, let me read that again to make sure I actually understand what just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, oh yeah, because he asked him the question, were you the kind of kid who tore the legs off of spiders? And he's like, yes. And so he just does exactly what he would do to the spiders. I guess that was his reasoning for that type of punishment. So that was interesting.
Yeah, and Bo is like angry. He's like yelling at Vetus. He was like, I think he just went to the, yeah, he just went a little crazy. But that's okay. We still love Bo because Bo is like a caretaker. He's like good on his word, and he wants to take care of Taniel, even though Taniel tried to kill him in the first book. No big deal.
Yeah.
Bo knows where his allegiance lies.
But he didn't want to kill him though. He was ordered to kill him. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
you can see our discussion about that in our previous episodes. That was way back in February of 2022. But Bo's an interesting character just because of the massive dichotomy of how much power he wields and how much like anger and force he can put out, and then how he acts with Nyla, and he's like really sweet and caring and like understanding, and he can like there's two different spectrums of how Bo as a character can be. It's like when he's normally in just like living his life, he's a great guy, but when you put him in like these crazy situations that calls for serious amounts of violence, like he can definitely step up to the plate and deliver. So yeah. I like Bo as a character.
Yeah, they're good. Okay, so what did they learn from the interrogation? Because so Fel has captured, and it's like Fel and Bo working over Lord Vetus.
Right.
So I think they learned a little bit about Lord Claremont, and I think they and his kind of behind the scenes plans, and then kind of like a lead for Adamat to find Joseph, his oldest son.
Yep. Yeah, basically they find out, or he says that he sold him to slavers, and he was going over to, I don't remember the place that he was being sent off to, but yeah, so he's basically gets sold, and he can't get him back, and he asks Vetus, like, where did you sell him? Like, what place did you use as like the to like ship him off, essentially. And so he gets information about where the slavers were and the password that he needs to like basically get in with the people, so he can have a conversation about getting his son back. And so yeah, that's his quest for most of this book most of this half of the book is talking with the slavers, trying to get Joseph back. They like ask for a bunch of money, essentially. They kind of like rough him up at the beginning, which we find out later is because he thinks that Vetus gave him the wrong password. Like he gave him the right code phrase to use, but then the wrong like verification password or something like that person was supposed to know. So like he had like half of the information right, and he thinks that's why that they basically like blackmailed him. Like they took 50,000 krona or whatever, told him he would bring his son back, but then they just never show up, essentially. So
and then Vetus planted that, right? Like that was a plan by him to give them the wrong password.
Yeah, so I think it was his idea to give him the wrong information, even though he was under serious duress by the Bo and Fel.
The torturing.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah. But before that happens, there's some scenes throughout Adamat's story that are also with Nyla as a POV character. So we get some more scenes with her, and we get like we get the shot or the story with Adamat during the raid on Vetus's house, and then we get like Nyla's perspective on that same situation. And so we have basically they capture Lord Vetus, and then
they get Fel back. Yep.
Yeah, Fel basically is responsible for keeping him away. Well, we kind of skipped over a thing where they capture him They capture him first, and then they raid the house. And so after they capture Vetus, it's Fel's job to keep him captured until they can finish the raid on the house, essentially. But Vetus is very clever and crafty. He wouldn't be in his position if he wasn't, and he's able to escape because Fel trusts her bodyguards to watch him, and the bodyguards could honestly care less about watching Vetus, and so they don't do a good job, and then they get killed for it. And then Fel gets like thrown out of a building and falls onto the street. I didn't know if she was going to be dead or not, so I was happy that she survived that fall.
Yeah.
But essentially
I worked very hard to get to her.
Yeah. But essentially Lord Vetus escapes, and he goes back to the manor because he's going to try and stop them from doing whatever they're doing. And meanwhile, Nyla, because Vetus got captured, Nyla was able to go free, and so she goes back to the manor because she wants to get Jakob, right? That's how you pronounce it correctly.
Yep.
So she wants to get him, and while that's happening, Vetus shows up, and he kills the eunuch. So that's the thing that happens, because the eunuch finds he gets his wife out, and while the eunuch is helping his wife, Faye, Adamat's wife Faye, the Vetus kills the eunuch, and then Vetus takes Faye captive, and then that's when Bo shows up, and then
okay.
pulls his arms out.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. So lots of little details here coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lord Vetus was very limber in his escape. He was
he was like a contortionist.
Yeah, that's the word that they used, which is funny because that all goes back to the Fontaine Academy. Like they're all trained like that, which is crazy.
Right.
So after the whole encounter with the house, Nyla approaches Bo for help, and Bo kind of takes her and Jakob under his wing and offers them protection and money, and they're living together, and she's like doing household chores for him, like sewing his privilege gloves like back together and like trying to figure out like what to do next. And then Bo's like, yeah, I'll give you like 100, and she was like, okay, that'll get us out of the city. And he was like, yeah, I meant to say like 100,000 crowner to get out. And she's like, what? She's like, we could live comfortably like for the rest of our lives on 100,000 crowner. Yeah. Bo's like, yeah, it's nothing. Just go ahead and take it. And it's so like that, like right there, like God loves a cheerful giver. Right. And Bo is just like, obviously he's secretly happy to be like able to give this money. But he's always like, it's no big deal, But you get this sense about Bo that he's like a good person and he wants good things for people. And he's just like, it's a little boy and like, his surrogate mom trying to take care of him. So he, it's this largesse that he just wants to give out, so much to people who, he barely knows.
Do you think it's like a way of him for... like to kind of almost like make amends for some of the terrible things he's done in his life? Like he has all this wealth that he's been like stocking away for years since he was in such a privileged pun in a privileged position with all his money and stuff. So
being and part of the cabal.
He's probably done some terrible things in his life, and he did terrible things in this. We just mentioned them
to Vetus.
Yeah, but I don't know. Just maybe I thought like that could be a way for him to like kind of, if
pay penance.
Yeah, pay penance. If you're like thinking about like, am I good enough on a scale, kind of like that. Some people think like if I'm good enough, then I'll get into heaven, and they kind of put themselves on a scale and like weigh their good and their bad deeds in a way.
Did you ever see The Good Place?
I have not, but my wife watched that. She said it was good.
It is. It does a lot of deep dives into ethics, but like basically. One of the people in The Good Places, I forget her name. She's an Indian actress, and she like raises the most money for like these fundraisers on Earth, and she gets in a good place so that like she would get a high score. And then like they go into her actual motives, and it was like the real reason that you're achieving is because you want to outdo your sister, who's like this famous like pop rock star person, and that was what motivated you to like lead all of these like philanthropy like movements and like get all this money and funding and stuff. And that's sort of like it's all about the motivation, and I think Bo's here. Yeah, I think that's in his character that he wants to help people, but I also think that what you bring up is a very astute point, that he probably also knows he's done terrible things, and he kind of wants to like pump some good back into the world.
Right. Yeah, and you also see that at the end of the book where we'll get there eventually, but where he basically says to Adamat, like, I want you to help me clear Taniel's name, and in exchange, I will go and help and get your son back from the slavers. And so that's another way of him trying to do some more good in the world. Like he wants to free his friend's name, and then he also wants to go and help Adamat get his son back from, any other person would not be able to do that, but because Bo is who he is, then he can do some extraordinary things. So yeah, there's the two sides of the coin. Like he's super powerful, so he can do a ton of evil, but also he's super powerful and he can do some really good things that nobody else could do. So yeah, I like Bo. He's a good guy, good character. Let's see, where do we leave off with? Some more with Nyla and Bo is that essentially Bo, in order to free Taniel's name, he gets word basically that Taniel's been court-martialed, and we'll talk about Taniel's story next here in a few minutes. And so Taniel has been court-martialed, but before he was court-martialed, he sent a bunch of information to Ricard Tumbler, I think it was, about some of the powder being siphoned away and like some of the military commanders getting rich off of it. And I think from Ricard, Bo got this information, and so he's basically looking for information about those types of things to free Taniel's name. And because Nyla was a laundress to one of the lords, Duke Eldamance, I think his name was. Eldamance. Yep. She and her go back to his manor where they used to live, and they try to find evidence of, some shifty books and stuff like that. And so yeah, they go there and they do find what they're looking for. They find this secret strong box near the fireplace under some board or whatever that was not in the big safe, which somebody had already stolen. So yeah, that's nothing really interesting about that. But yeah, that's just kind of what they're doing in this part of the story.
Well, there was one thing that was really interesting about that.
Sure.
Which was Bo asked Nyla to put the gloves on, and she snapped her fingers and nothing happened. And then she turns around, she doesn't have the gloves on, and Bo slaps her across the face, and she's gonna retaliate against Bo, and he's like, "Stop! Look at your hand." And she turns around, and her hand is on fire, and she is touching the else without wearing any gloves.
Dun dun dun.
That
crazy revelation.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a cool thing that happens towards the end. Yeah, so that means that's going to be interesting for book 3. So it's going to be like the Bo and Nyla power couple with their non-biological son Jakob.
Yeah.
That sounds like a novella spin-off story.
Yeah.
That sounds like a comic book. And Jakob is also heir to the throne or whatever, if there was a throne.
Yep. He's fifth or something in line, third or fifth or something.
Yeah. Yes, that's interesting. Because Bo has been making comments about Nyla throughout the story. Are you sure? Have you ever been tested to be privileged? All this kind of stuff. Because there's something about her that he thinks she is privileged, essentially. And then throughout this, towards the end, in this scene, he basically tricks her. He leaves his gloves there and he leaves, and he's basically just sitting there watching her, waiting for her to put on the gloves to see if she'll try to do something. So it was his way of testing Nyla to get her to try and see if she can touch the else. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting plot point for book 3 for sure. Yeah, so let's jump back to Adamat. So essentially Adamat and his wife Faye have been through a ton of stuff, and you can tell that Faye is seriously scarred by all of the stuff that's happened to her and, while she was a captive of Lord Vetus. And we don't know all the specifics of what he did to her because she's not a POV character. We just get stuff through Nyla, but we can assume that he probably did some terrible things to her, and yeah, she needs some time to recover for sure from what happened.
I mean, she's so shell-shocked that she doesn't even want to spend time with her kids.
Yeah.
She's usually a mother, any parent is drawn to being with their kids, especially after something like that. You feel like you've been away from them so long that you want to be close to them, and she just doesn't want to be near anybody. So that's a real level of harm that's happened to her, and she just And there's like times when Adamat is talking to her and she's like spaced out and she like shakes and like is back in reality. Yep. So she's deeply scarred by her time with Vetus in the house.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also Adamat's like, I need to go. I can't remember the place where he thinks that his son was taken, the location, but he's like, he's like, I need to go there and try to save him. And I was like, no, you're not going to go. We're not going to leave as a family. We are staying together as a unit. There's no more separating. That's kind of her like philosophy now, is like, there's been too many times where they get separated and bad things happen to either one of them. And she's like, from now on, it's either we're all going to suffer or nobody's going to suffer. There's none of this. You're going off and doing a thing, and then I'm going off and doing this thing. It's just,
and that's what Faye says, right?
Right. Yeah. She's like, we're all in this together, for good or for ill. So yeah, that's, in a way, I like that. But I mean, but again, towards the end, he's going to have to go away and help both do the stuff and help Taniel, in book 3. So, I guess she does kind of relent on that, at the end of the book. But you can just tell, like, she's so scarred that she doesn't want anyone to leave anymore. She just wants everyone to stay together. Yeah, because there's been a lot of trauma in that, which completely makes sense from my point of view.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's just like, you have to make that choice. Like, if you were a human and you had to make that choice, like, you had a family of, how many kids did he have? Like 6 or 7 or something?
Yeah, I think 6 kids, yeah.
And then, like, you have all these kids who are safe and they're with their mom, and like, you're the dad, and then like, you have your eldest child out in the wind.
Right.
Like, there's a pull to go, like, take care of that, but at the same time, like, for the greater good, like, if you are that kid and you're the one who's captured in like enemy lands, you want your dad to come for you.
Yes.
And then like, the mom is saying, we have everyone that we have, and we need to be satisfied with this. Yeah. And so that's just like a huge moral dilemma.
Yeah, for sure.
Know? Like, I pray that I'm never in a situation like...
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what would you do in this situation, Gabe?
Oh my gosh. I think about, I got this political survey called me, and I spent like the 20 minutes on the phone with them to like, complete the survey or whatever. And they're asking me all these political questions, and they're like, what worries you most? And then it was like, bipartisan, like not acting together and stuff like this. And I was just like, where's Russia on this list? Because they were asking me about all these like domestic issues. I was I'm just like, what if we go to war? Like, well, I remember being in high school and being like 16 and being like, I can be drafted when I'm 18 years old. Like, yeah, that's a crazy thought. And like, I think I'm past the age of like being drafted. I got surgery on me. Well, I don't know about past being drafted, but I did have surgery on my knee, so I don't know if there's a draft. I don't want to go. To be honest, I want to stay with my family and live my life here. I think they'll draft up to like 50 if you're healthy. But continue. Anyway, I would not want to go. I'd want to stay with my family, but like, you have to be a patriot and you have to step up if you're called upon by your country. And, I don't think that millennials, like there's not the sense of patriotism that there used to be in the country after like World War II and the Cold War, and like Vietnam is where we started to like fragment as a country, and like there are half the people behind it, half the people were not, and like I just feel like there's low loyalty to the flag of the United States now. And like, if we were to have a war, like, I really feel like people would be like, I'm not joining. Just like I just said I wasn't, like, I would much rather be with my family. And that's the easy way, but you need people to step up and like, be a patriot and join the army and fight for what America is. And, I'm just so thankful that we've gotten this far and there's been no World War III. So,
Yeah.
I always worry about that. I was like, I've considered moving to Canada because like, one of the best analogies was like, Canada is thinking to itself like we were built over a meth lab, the meth lab being the United States, because of all the craziness and turmoil that's been going on in our political system and everything. And
Yeah.
oh, all right. So those are the dark places that my mind goes. Like what, like I told you last week, the term forced march is a scary term to me. I never want to be captured and put in on. And like, yeah, you're going to die if you don't just keep walking.
Yeah. All right. So we have, basically after this whole ordeal, Ricard Tumbler, who is the guy running for prime minister, and one of Adamat's close friends, he's basically like, hey, you guys have been through a lot of stuff. You need to come with me on like basically a vacation, essentially. He's going to take them up. He's basically been working on this canal system in one of the northern rivers. Maybe if I'm editing, if I'm talking to editing Tyler right now, put up a map of Adro, and you can see up at the top of the map, there's a little river with a canal that goes through the mountain range. And so he's been working on this thing up there, and he wants to take them up there to go see it and hang out and, not have to worry about anything, essentially. And so while they're going up there, they discover that Lord Claremont, and I know he was in the first book, yes, but I don't remember specifically what his role was.
I think you just...
he's like the leader of this trading company.
Yep. Does he have ties to the Duke... the guy who's really good at fencing, the Archdiocese, that's what I was trying to say. I feel like him and the Archdiocese.
Yeah, the guy.
And of course, Vetus is there, and he's directly under Vetus for employment.
Yes. But yeah, anyway.
He is Vetus's employer, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. But anyway, he is invading through the canal system because it's basically finished, and I guess before Ricard can get like everything set up and finalized and defended and stuff, like he's basically used the canal against him to get a bunch of ships through, and the canal hasn't been used yet, so this is the first time that ships are going through it, and he's basically takes a big army through the canal system, and they sail down to Adapest, and
which is like the heart of the country.
Yeah, that's like the capital.
And it's like not near the borders or anything. It's like dead center of the country.
Yeah, if you looked at the map that I put up earlier, you'll see Adapest in the middle of it. And it seems like it's basically like he's just occupying the city with these forces, because all of the other military forces are towards the border of the country fighting the Kez, and so there's this big hole in the capital because there's not enough military strength for the troops to be everywhere. So essentially he's going to occupy, and like I'm putting this in quotes if you're listening on audio, he's gonna run for prime minister, but I think he's just gonna try to like take over leadership of the city or the country. And yeah, so that cuts the vacation that Adamat and Faye were hoping to have a bit short, because they have to go back to Adapest and figure out what's going on with that. He gives like this big speech at the end, Lord Claremont does, saying like, I'm here to run for prime minister and I'm gonna help everybody, like a typical political speech. I'm gonna do all these great things or whatever. But he's delivering.
Yeah, he's delivering it though. He's like, I brought you army, I brought you food, I brought you like gunpowder, like all these things you need to survive, basically, and fight off the Kez. Yeah. Yeah, and so that's basically where we end this part of the story, is them, Tamas is going to come back into the country, and I assume he's going to go
deal with this situation. So we'll have to see what happens in the next book. But yeah. And then at the very end of the book, we have Bo, like I mentioned, asking for Adamat to come help him go clear Taniel's name. And in exchange, he's going to go and find his son. And so, yeah, that's where we leave Adamat. Yeah. Did you like Adamat's story in this book?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the family, like there is the Tamas and Taniel, like father-son family like thing, but Adamat is the true family man where it's like his wife has been captured, his kids have been captured.
Yep.
So, you know, as, you know, we're both fathers now, I
Yes.
feel like the emotional turmoil that Adamat goes through, you know, it just makes me thankful. It also like takes me to some dark places. Like I said, I worry about war and like, what if our country gets ripped apart?
Yes.
But we will deal with that when we come, and we will have God to lean on, and we will pray for wisdom and pray for safety.
Yes.
That's what we can do.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think, yeah, I like Adamat's story. I like Adamat as a character. I like Sue Smith always tagging around.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I did like that scene with Sue Smith where they go to those slavers and they beat him up a little bit, but then he's like, I would go back in there and wreck all of them essentially. He's like,
and he threw some guy out of a window like by his face.
Yeah. Good old Sue Smith. Nothing beats some good old hired muscle.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where Taniel's story ends.
Adamat's story.
Or yeah, not Taniel, Adamat's story. We're gonna talk about Taniel right now, though. Let's keep moving on, so this podcast doesn't run too long. So Taniel, basically, we leave off him where he's gonna have to go through this military court-martial and this trial, and it's pretty much like they've already made up their mind. It seems like in this trial, and they basically want him to be gone. And there's one general who stands up for him is General Hilanska, however you pronounce that.
I think I'm trying to remember. I think you got it right.
Hilanska. Yeah, that sounds right.
Hilanska.
Yeah. But he votes no. And in the middle of this trial, though, Fel, who was in Adamat's part of the story with Ricard, Ricard sends her out to like speak on Taniel's behalf, essentially, because he they get word that Taniel's being court-martialed, and so in the first half of the book, Ricard Tumbler wanted Taniel to be his like running mate, essentially, for the prime ministership, and now Ricard sees an opportunity where he can get Taniel in his pocket, essentially, by saving him from this court-martial, because he's basically going to be executed for his crimes, but because Fel steps in and speaks on his behalf and says, basically they almost kind of like blackmail the army in a sense, where she tries to say like, hey, he's running for prime minister, you can't kill him, like we need him, and then like, no, we're not going to listen to that, and then at the end she's just like, okay, well then if you're not going to agree to that, then we're just going to pull our funding, we're not going to send you supplies, like all of this stuff.
The unions are going to shut down, there will be no more like supplies being sent to the front.
Yeah. And so they're basically like, either free Taniel or you don't get support for the war effort, essentially. And they're like, well, I guess they're going to have to do that then. So they don't kill him, and they basically just, what is it? A dishonorable discharge? Was that the correct terminology?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but that sounds right.
Yeah. So basically he's kicked out of the military in an unhonorable way because he committed treasonous crimes, or so they say. And this leads him to be approached by the wings of Adam or Adam.
Yeah, I think in the book It was funny. Tyler and I were talking before the podcast, and he was like, he never hears the words said out loud, and I never see the words written. So I was like typing them, and like I typed couple, like like CA, and then the word pole, and then it's totally KA-POEL. So, it's funny. Tyler's always seeing the words, and I'm always hearing the words.
Right, that's right. We each have our specialization. You're the pronunciation expert, and I am the spelling expert. So
yeah, and I need to make better records. Yes.
Together, we form a great team, right?
Yep.
So
synergistic.
That's right. We complete each other. Yeah, you can continue with that. Whatever you.
Okay. Do you remember the person who hires Taniel after, basically, like as he's walking out of the court martial?
Yeah, I can't remember her name.
Is it Abrax?
Yes, that's right, Abrax.
Okay.
It's funny because she's like, "Hey, you could." She's talking to him, but basically, and Taniel's like, "I didn't think you'd just come over here and recruit me." And she's like, "Well, I don't usually do this, but like, actually, I'm just recruiting you." It was like a funny scene.
Yeah, and she was saying he's worth 50 men on the front line,
right?
Because he's the Powder Mage, and now he's like next level Powder Mage, like basically like the pretty equivalent of a Powder Mage,
right?
And we see that come into full force when he's interacting with Kresimir here in a few minutes.
Right.
So anyway, he finds, so he's hired, and he's going to go to the Wings of Adam, and he's going to collect Pole, so he goes back to his tents, and the dredgers are there, and Pole is naked on the bed, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to have our way with her, and you're going to watch." And then Taniel just like sees red, and people die gruesomely. Yeah. He rips the jaw out of the first guy.
Yeah,
that's all I remember, and it's just
also one of the most gruesome scenes in the series. Although I think Bo's pulling arms out of people's sockets is probably a little worse, but this one feels more brutal because it's hand-to-hand combat, like he's using his hands and his fists
to physically do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Bo's just using his magic hands, his magic fingers.
His spirit fingers.
If you're listening on audio, I'm like doing, I don't know, what's this, jazz hands or something?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think they're spirit fingers from
fingers. But yeah, this one felt pretty brutal. But it's also like, what a terrible, like the generals of the military like put them up to doing this because they didn't get their way with the court martial. And it just shows like all the corruption and the, like how like the military is like they don't hold to their own standards, and they could basically just get away with whatever they want to do because they're the people in power. And it just kind of leaves like a bad taste in your mouth. Like you almost like want Taniel to like not be in the military anymore, just so he doesn't have to deal with all this crap and this BS with all the military.
Yeah, like
generals,
the bureaucracy.
Right?
Like
yeah, it's just
he's got the, it's the epitome of like putting the red tape around someone. Like you have someone who wants to do what's right. He wants to fight for Adro. He wants to keep the Kez back. He wants to fight for his country. And the higher ups are saying, you can't do that. Get off the front lines. Listen to what I tell you.
Right.
So the authority there is just, it's very annoying to be Taniel. And then like, this is just bringing up all the dirt at the bottom and like that he has to deal with. So all right, so how do we get Taniel and let's also just take a moment to remember that Mahali was the one who kind of sparked this whole series of events because he talked to Taniel about apologizing to Doravir.
Yes.
And then that kind of leads to the court martial, and
because he goes to apologize, and they basically just like are goading him or antagonizing him to like make a move. They're basically just like rejecting his apology essentially, and they're wanting
which
him
is
to
ungracious,
make
by the way, which is ungracious.
Just like all of the top military people are just like the worst. Like all of them, like none of them do anything except for who's the guy who got paralyzed? Etan. Yeah, he's the only one I like.
Yeah, Colonel Etan.
Everybody else, as they say in the book, everyone else can go to the pit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so Brian McClellan is getting into like writing this because he's like using the word pit a lot more like in this back half of this book. Like I see the word pit all the time. Which is fun. Like I want to like use that cuz I don't like swear normally in life, so I always like to find like fun like alternatives to swearing because I have these kids with these like filthy mouths in my class, and like I try and model like different ways of saying things. Oh my gosh! All right, this one kid was saying like, "Oh, these guys are like D riders." I will let your imagination fill in what that D stands for. They're always after this kid, and they're always like trying to get his Pokemon cards. And I was like, okay, let's not call them D riders. Let's say they're always up in his business. So like I'm always trying to like coach them into better decisions, things that are more socially acceptable. But man, the language that comes out of some of these kids, it's just jaw dropping. Yeah. Okay. I digress.
Side quest. Have to have one at least.
Okay, so now he's like being told that the regular military want him, and the Wings of Adam haven't officially like conscripted him into their like mercenaries, and so he's in like limbo,
right?
I think because he's like a civilian, for these war crimes of killing these dredgers, and he was saying it was in self-defense. But eventually, I forget how we transition into him infiltrating the Kez camp.
I think there's some kind of conversation with Mahali about like he wants to save his brother, Kresimir, because he's he thinks he's going insane. So he thinks that if he can heal Kresimir of his going mad, essentially, then he can have like a rational conversation with him and convince him to leave and stop whatever he's doing. So I think that's the rationale for Mahali essentially saying, okay, you're in this awkward position, you're basically on house arrest, you can't go anywhere, but since I'm a god, I can like make you invisible and I can get you out, and then you can go and infiltrate the Kez camp. And essentially what Mahali wants is he wants the blood of Kresimir. Is that what they need? Because he says that something about, I can't remember all the specifics, if it's like something about Kapol, she has some kind of healing magic as well, if I remember correctly. Or is it Mahali that's going to do the healing?
I feel like I don't remember the details. I'm sad to say. I also was telling Tyler before we get ready for the podcast, like I was behind on my reading, and like on my car ride, I like skipped all my conversations with my friends and just to like listen to the book. And like even on the way home, I was like 2 times speed, and I was like in the zone. Like I had it turned up, so it was the only thing I could hear. Yes. Vivian was like, she was like, "Dad, can we tell a Spidey story?" And I was like, "No." and then I like put the book on at 2 times speed, and she like ended up falling asleep in the back seat.
Look at the commitment to the podcast, folks. Well, also here, to piggyback off of that. So last night I was up until 1:30 finishing the book.
That's late.
Yeah. So both of us were committed to finishing the book before we recorded today, because we've made a commitment that Thursday will be podcast day. So we have to be ready on Thursday.
And so, I think that it'll create a rhythm for us. And I think like even today, I feel more ready and more into the podcast than I have, those first few episodes back. And I feel like just kind of the momentum of it is going to be good for us, Tyler. I think it's going to be good.
Indeed. Okay. Second side quest complete. There were probably other side quests that we already did, but there you go.
Okay, so just to kind of speed it up. So Taniel infiltrates into the Kez camp. He find it and the invisibility. So Mahali gives him some magical food, makes him invisible until he gets like within a few like miles or meters of Kresimir, somewhere in there. He finds a guard. He tells the guard, "Take me to Kresimir." He finds his way to Kresimir. He finds the bloody sheets, and then Taniel. Oh, and the whole time we hear about Kresimir is trying to find the eye behind the flintlock.
Yes.
And that's Taniel two-shot. So he shot Kresimir, and Kresimir wears this gold mask, and so finally, Taniel's find the bloody bed sheets, and he's grabbed them, and he's gonna get out of there. And then there's this whole scene where he kind of like fights with Kresimir, and like all these guards are coming in, and Taniel's beating him up, and then the mask gets knocked off of Kresimir, and and we learned some interesting things that there's been some attempts on Kresimir's life. Like the church tried to kill him, the Kez have tried to kill him secretly. Ipoli tried to kill him, and then like the Adro spies have tried to kill him. And like knives will like turn like to putty or like bend when they try and attack him. And Kresimir was also hit with like artillery fire, like a huge thing, and it exploded off of Kresimir's body and like injured all of these commanders and killed people around Kresimir, but Kresimir was undamaged. So Taniel's like escaping, and he runs and he jumps out the window, and he lands in the river, and the river is like whisking him away. And then Kresimir just like picks up Taniel and like half the river and like brings him back into the courtyard, and then they just proceed to like beat the living daylights out of Taniel.
But it's interesting in that scene where like he's resisting Kresimir's like I guess like his spoken word, his spoken word magic, like to compel you to do something. Like he's basically like Kresimir's trying to tell him to stop us basically, and he can resist that command and he can still move, although very slowly. So that just speaks to his like elevated power level, I guess.
Yep.
How he has like, I think you mentioned he's like the pretty version of a powder mage. Yeah,
and on top of that, he also has Karpol is weaving protections around him.
Yeah, her wards.
And there's a part where he's getting beat up, and this is right before he's put up on like, the
cross,
on the huge cross, where he was like, "I don't have any broken bones," and he was like, "Is this Karpol's magic, keeping my bones from breaking?"
Yep.
So he is hoisted up. So he's captured, and one more thing, he gets into a fist fight with Kresimir, the god of this world, and then he just like
he gives him a good hitting.
Yeah, he beats the daylights out of him. And the mask falls off, and like Kresimir's eye is like weeping blood or pus, and like it's all bruised.
I think it was like the eye socket, like it was his whole eye was gone. It was like dripping blood from the socket.
Yeah. And that's why he's got his bloody sheets. Kind of another like gruesome thing there. And that's why I think Brian McClellan, like, there's that part of me that like loves the gruesome side of it. I love reading like when Tamas or Taniel like get in their rage modes, and like there's this like when we talk about Tamas, there's like he like charges after Nixlaus, and he's like Nixlaus, and this is like right after he like goes into a powder trance, and Vlora's just like, get back. So there's just like he saw something in his eyes, and Vlora was like, just you gotta get out of the way because things are about to go down. So I like the way Brian McClellan like writes these characters, because they have rage issues, but there's also like Taniel has never slept with Kapol. Like he's had plenty of opportunities. They talk about impropriety in the army, and he's never done that. And Tamas, like, hates people, but like you can get behind why, you know, Nick Slaus beheaded his wife, and like he, you know, views that as a failure. And they're just so mad, and that they get like they go into these rages and stuff. But I don't know. I just like I don't have to rage against people now that I've read like Tamas and like Taniel like raging on people.
Yeah. You can live vicariously through their rage.
Yeah, it's good because then it's like sublimation. Like it comes out in appropriate form. Like I don't have to live like because someone else is getting to do it for me.
Yeah. Did Taniel sleep with Cup Hole in this half of the book though? I thought it was implied that he did. Maybe we haven't. Maybe that's towards the end.
I don't
know if it was explicitly stated that he did.
Did they? I think they kissed.
I know they kiss. Yeah.
Yeah, they kiss.
That's at the towards the very end.
But I think that's as far as it's gone. But I could be wrong.
Maybe I misread something.
I didn't read it like 3 times like I did with some of the Great Hunt and everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So Taniel beats up Kresimir, but he's captured and he's beat up multiple times. He's strung up on the cross, and he has these weird conversations with Julene. She's like, the worst part about not dying is not dying, and she's like screaming in agony as she like switches which arm is like holding up her entire body. And
I loved her the description of her face. It was like she was missing teeth, like half her hair was gone.
Oh yeah. Oh, just like totally ravaged by the Kez army and can't die.
And she doesn't have hands either, so that way she can't do her magic. So yeah, also brutal. So Kresimir took her hands and everything, and Taniel's up there, and then Kapol comes in to rescue him, and then she's being overpowered, but Taniel has managed to like work free of his bonds, and he's up like 6 or 7 stories or something. I think that's how high the crosses were in the first part of the book, and drops down and just like kills people. And then Tyler, I told you it was coming when Kapol like dumps out her knapsack, and all these wax dolls start coming out. He was like, there's 5, then there was 10, then there was 100, and then there was like 1,000, and then an impossible number of dolls coming out of it. When I read that scene, I just love it every time. It's just like I just see like a geyser of like wax dolls just like poof, like exploding from inside that sack, and then she's like controlling like a whole army. Like that scene just like, you don't see it coming. Like, I just, that when I read that the first time, I was just like, what just happened? Yeah.
That's such a cool scene.
I guess she had a lot of time to make thousands and thousands of dolls.
Yeah, because I think
it's implied that there's some kind of magical thing with it where the dolls can multiply or something like that.
Yeah, like we don't truly know, but like there are many times in the book, like Kapol has made like a doll of Fel, and like she's walking around the dead battlefields making dolls. Like
she has a doll of Taniel.
Oh yeah, I forgot that detail, and she had a doll of Kresimir.
Yep. That's why he wanted. She wants his blood, so she can control him. I think, right?
I think so. And at this point, I think Mahali dies.
Yeah, he comes into the scene and he's trying to talk to Kresimir, and they have like a cordial exchange, and then I think there's just there's a light or an explosion or something from Kresimir, and then basically when Taniel looks back, then Mahali is just gone, and so we don't know exactly what happened to him, but we just know that he's not there anymore. So yeah, that'll be revealed in book 3, I would assume, if Mahali comes back, or if he doesn't, or what the story is with that.
Yeah, there was I think I remember, but there was a line that stuck out to me in the reading, which was someone's describing the magical backlash that happened when Mahali died, and they said it was similar to what happened when Kresimir was shot through the eye, but they also said this one with Mahali felt more permanent.
Oh, so, right. That's right. I do remember that line.
Yeah. So there is that kind of like hint from Brian McClellan.
Yes, because Taniel was there whenever he shot Kresimir, so he knew what that was like. And so he could compare directly to what happened in this scene, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that makes sense.
And then, so Taniel and Karpol, like, Karpol controls, like, the whole army. She's getting, like, the dolls to fight each other. Like, so they make the description, the dolls are, like, fighting each other, but then there's also some dolls that were fighting, like, invisible forces. So those indicate, like, soldiers that are surrounded by people not controlled by Karpol, and they're fighting off those guys, and then the dolls are fighting each other. And then so there's enough Pandalirium that they can escape out of the camp and make their way over to safety. And I think that's where Taniel's timeline comes to an end.
Yes.
So what did you think of the whole like Kez camp, Julene, and the escape for Taniel?
Yeah, it was cool. I liked how he took that guard hostage and was just like taking him around all these different places, and then at the end he's like, I can either kill you or I can tie you up in this tree. Which one do you want? And the guy, I just thought that was a funny scene. At
work we called those giving our students dignified choices.
Dignified choices. That's good.
Yeah.
I think a part of me would have liked to see, because at the beginning of the book, Ricard Tumbler approaches him and says, "Hey, you should, run for prime minister with me." I think a part of me would have liked that to happen, like seeing that side of the story, that side of the the world, like more of the political stuff. Yeah, and maybe like Taniel, because he has such knowledge of like warfare and stuff, like he could maybe do stuff from behind the scenes to control the war effort in that way. And then if he's in the prime minister, he can control the military people who are super corrupt and stuff, so that could have had more influence on maybe resolving those things from that end of the spectrum. So I don't know, part of me thinks that would have been a cool kind of avenue to explore, or even they could have had an opportunity to do that halfway through, whenever he gets discharged and he's going to go to the wings of Adam. But before then, because Ricard basically got him freed, he owes him 3 years. So I think that would have been a cool thing to explore in book 3, where he gets discharged and then he has to go back and do the political stuff for a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. I think that could have been an interesting angle to take.
I know you mentioned Stormlight Archives is kind of that way with the political intrigue.
I think I mentioned Mistborn's more like that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I still haven't read either of those series, so
yeah.
I get them confused.
Yeah. But Mistborn has the house's political alliances and stuff like that. At least the first book does. The other books have some of that, but it's a little bit different. But yeah, I just thought that could have been a cool angle to explore, because we haven't really got any. We got some political stuff in the first book with all the Tamas's council and stuff, figuring out how to run the country and things like that. But yeah, other than that, I did like Taniel's story. I think he's just kind of I feel like he's almost a character without a purpose. I feel like he's kind of in this situation where the only thing he knows how to do is kill people, which is what Mahali says, when I mentioned in my favorite quote, your profession is just killing people, essentially. And I feel like that's basically all he knows how to do. And then if he's not doing that, he doesn't feel like he's fulfilling his purpose. So I feel like it might be interesting to explore in the third book, what is Taniel's purpose beyond being a soldier? Like, does he have a purpose beyond being a soldier? Like, does he have some kind of deeper level within him? So I don't know. Just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really astute to kind of talk about that, because this is going to be a really weird analogy, but like I identify with that statement that like at a young age, like my identity, just like Taniel's is killing, like mine was ultimate frisbee. Like it decided so many things in my life. Like I started in high school, and then like I went to Penn State, and then like I was friends with the frisbee team, and like 5 nights a week, practicing frisbee every night. Who did I hang out on the weekends? The frisbee team. I moved to Louisiana. I started a frisbee team at my high school. I like traveled 2.5 hours to play a 2-hour game, and then 2.5 hours home so that I could like do frisbee. And like, I feel like it's very human to be like so into something that it forms your identity. And like the only thing that we're really supposed to do that with is Christ, and like find our identity in Christ, and like that's the driving force that makes the decisions about what we should do, who we should spend our time with, and like the decisions that we make. But so many people, just like me, they find their idols. Like a lot of times it's sports, just like mine was a sport. Mine's like not a common sport, ultimate frisbee, but like people like baseball, wrestling, football, soccer, field hockey, softball. Like these are all things that people are into, and then like their lives just shape around them. So and I feel like Taniel is doing that. Like I'm good at killing. That's all I know. I could be in the back lines, but you know what? I'd rather be killing Kez and holding the line in the front, because that's who I am. And these are young characters. Like Bo, they mentioned like he's young, but he looks like he's seen so much. Like that's what Nyla's observation. Nyla is young.
Right.
Olam is young. Vlora is young.
Yeah. I think Tamas and Gavril are probably the older characters, I guess.
Yeah, I mean they have history together from like previous wars and everything.
Yep. It's interesting. And I think Mahali kind of has he is almost trying to like speak into Taniel's life, maybe try to get him to like pick a different path. But now that Mahali's gone, I don't know. I think there might be I feel like Taniel has more. There's something more to his story than just killing Kez. So I'm gonna look for that in book 3. So
okay.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
How do you want to do Tamas?
Tamas. Let's just start with his trick on the Kez cavalry. So he's luring them into this trap that he's setting, and he doesn't know if it's going to work. And he's doing this interesting thing where he's making his own troops like think that they're going to fail. So in a way, he's setting a trap. Like he knows that it's a trap, but a lot of his soldiers don't know what the plan is. And so he is kind of banking on the fact that some of his soldiers are going to act in like a way that will entice the cavalry to charge, because they think that they're being afraid, like they think they're going to lose, and so some of them are fleeing across the river, and so like now's the perfect time for us to charge, we're going to catch them off guard and all this stuff. And so there's this interesting balance where Tamas is plotting this like master plan, but he's not revealing all of the information to all of his troops. So yeah, it's just interesting as a commander, like you're making a plan for the good of the whole team, but you're doing it through like a deceptive way, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense.
I just have personal experience with that with a company that I once worked for, and like information was very like, you cannot repeat this, do not tell anyone outside of your department about this change that's like in the pipeline and is coming. Like we don't talk about it until we have everything figured out and we have all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed. And it just like I was able to do it. It's just, I just want more transparency. But what was good is like they did have like a wide net of like if it involved someone, they weren't going to surprise them with it down the line. They were brought in early into the conversation, and we talked through things that needed to happen with the appropriate people. And I've also worked in institutions where everything's done over email on like what people are feeling at the time, and there's no like deep discussion about like what is the best approach. It's more like we're putting out fires and we just need to do this now, and then in hindsight, well, maybe that wasn't the best way to handle that. Whereas like the first company that I worked with was just like we're going to talk about very deeply and make informed decisions, which I think is a great model. But they did use that like very like on a need to know basis sort of thing.
Yeah. I just thought it was an interesting strategy because he wants to make it convincing to the enemy. So, which it works. And so they charge, and they've basically dug this big like trench along their line, and they've covered it with like shrubs and brush or whatever, and they have these big spikes in there. And so when the Kez charge, all the horses like just topple into this pit or this trench, and they all get skewered. It is kind of sad hearing all of the like all the horses are dying, so that's kind of no fun. Which there's another scene where Tamas basically runs his horse to death and then has to like put it down because it broke its leg or whatever. So there's a lot of like horse death in these books because horses are a big part of the military. So if you're squeamish about animal death, this might not be the series for you.
And I mean, for sure, that's true. Unlike Ranger's Apprentice, where the horses are always fine.
That's good to know. Isn't that more of a kids level book though?
Yeah, it's like adolescent.
Right. Yeah.
And I like that series. It was fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's this giant pit, and they just like describe all the horses and all the people dying and like getting trampled, and it basically fills up. It was like super wide, super long, and super deep, and then there's just all these horses and all these men just like filling it up. And that's how Tamas is able to break Béange Ippili's attack on him, and he's able to capture him. And so they're marching through the Kez, countryside, and they are approaching Camamir's grave. And Camamir is Gavril's brother. And Gavril and Tamas are related through Erica. So Gavril and Camamir were Erica, which is Tamas's wife's, brothers. And so Gavril treats Tamas like a brother. And Camamir was also a brother to Tamas, and he died in Kez. I think it was on an attempt to assassinate Ippili. And then they things go south and they have to escape. But Camamir doesn't. And it's weird. Tamas has this internal struggle where he's telling Gavril oh, I don't know where the grave is. And then in his internal monologue, he's like, I know exactly where the grave is. Tamas has all these weird, he acts in certain ways, even though his heart or his conscience is pulling him in a different direction. Or vice versa. He feels more strongly about something than he lets on. He does that too. So him and Gavril get into this big fight because Gavril's accusing Tamas of not being like a brother to his brother, and he's like, how could you? And Tamas is saying, well, how could you? You like fell into a bottle for like 12 years, like, and then you're gonna come at me. And so they get into it. And Gavril, so they're broken up. Olam and Beyange Ipoli come and they talk to them, and then there's like an outrider that's coming towards Tamas, and Tamas, being the Powder Mage, he starts killing the Kez behind the rider, and he takes out like all the people at the back of the pack, and then he kills them. And during this time, Gavril is in a different, like, he's off riding, and he's captured by a different group of the Kez, and he's taken as a prisoner to Alvation, which is in Delev, and it's a city in Delev. So this means that Tamas is approaching his re-entry back into Adro. So, but he rides off trying to find Gavril, and just like Tyler just said, like, he runs his horse to death, and he's got to kill the horse, and then eventually Valora finds him. She rode off after Tamas, and is able to partner up with him to do first watch and get some sleep and wait for the army. So that gets us to Alvation. So Gavril has been taken to Alvation, and that's what's leading Tamas there. But as they're traveling through the countryside, there's rumors of the Adran army, which is Tamas's army, coming through and hurting people and killing people and moving to Alvation. So Tamas goes and kind of scouts out Alvation, and he sees all these Adran, his army's uniforms out there, like, and they're obviously occupying Alvation. Yep. And so that's the big Kez ruse, is they are playing a dangerous game where they're going to become the Adran army and then burn Alvation to the ground and make it look like Tamas did it, so that the Delev military will get involved on the Kez side, right, or at least just against Adro. Yep. And then Adro has to fight 2 wars instead of 1, and then outnumbering and Adro will fall because they don't have the military strength to take on Delev and the Kez army. Yep. So,
and that plan is being run by Nixlaus, the guy from book 1. Who was it when is that when Taniel like threw him into the river or whatever, or into the Adsea?
Tamas threw him in.
Oh yeah, Tamas, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Because he's bringing the Accords, saying how Adro needs to like pay Kez all this money, and he's like, "I'm throwing you in the river, buddy." Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting plan, but it's also interesting because they've captured. Say his name again, Beyan. You're the pronunciation.
Beyange Ipoli.
Yes, Beyange Ipoli. And Tamas thinks that like he's one of the good sons of the king, and he's more reasonable, and he's more like, I think he's easier to talk to, and you can like more rational. You can have a rational discussion with him about, like, how can we both profit, or how can we both win in this situation. And so he's like mad that the Kez are destroying their own land to make it look like the Androns are doing it. And that's on his father's orders. And so that's breeding some discontent between the Kez kind of leadership. So I think in Tamas's mind, he's hoping that potentially if they get to kill his father, that maybe Beyange Ipoli will be able to take over as the ruler, and that will be a much better ruler for the Androns to communicate with instead of his father. So correct, some political stuff going on there, but that's interesting. But it's an interesting plan to just try to get the Deliv nation on the side of the Kez, although it is pretty immoral, I guess you would say, to just essentially burn an entire city, civilians, like everybody's just gonna go down to get what you want with the war. It's, I guess you make tough decisions and questionable moral decisions whenever you're in wars like this.
Yeah, and we know Nick Slaus just like he's out. He doesn't out for blood, to get to kill, to bring Adro down and Tamas. So we get a little bit of backstory with Tamas in Alvation. So he meets Damazlin and Helana. And so Helana is one of Tamas's lovers post Erica. So Erica was his wife, beheaded by Nixlaus, who brings Tamas her head. And we kind of revisit that as Tamas goes into his rage and tries to kill Nixlaus. But so he and Helana were together for a few months. And she's a Delev, and her brother is Sabon, who we met in the first book. And he dies, and he's Tamas's right-hand man. And I think he dies when they storm...
yes.
At the end of the book. Yeah, the estates of
I'm blanking on his name too. We mentioned it. Yeah, the Archdiocese. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and he's got that whole army in there with all their air rifles and stuff.
Yep.
And then Damazlin is like a duke in this Delev area, and so he's used to commanding troops, and they are basically the resistance in Alvation to fight off the Adrans, who are actually Kez, dressed up as Adrans, led by Duke Nixlaus. And so they've been trying to figure out a way to thwart them and to get them out of the town. And so they're the resistance. And Tamas has history with Helana. And then he meets Damazlin for the first time. And right before this, Tamas goes all Powder Mage and kills 6 Kez Adran people outside the house, and then just it's like a dance. He's hitting people with the sword and then getting out of the way and then ramming people through, and then Vlora shoots someone, excuse me. So he works with them after some initial heat and anger with these two, because it's supposedly his army that's killing everyone. Right. So they have to overcome that. So he learns that Nixlaus is in town commanding this army. And Tamas, you would hate anyone who beheaded your wife. I'm that's just, that's just where you end up in arch enemy territory if you do that to someone. That's just hands down what's going to happen. So, Tamas is going to mix business with pleasure here. He's going to aim for Nixlaus, and he's going to try and save Alvation, and then fulfill his vengeance desire on killing Nixlaus.
And he's also trying to free Gavril, because Gavril's been captured.
Oh yeah, that is a big motivator. Yep. He's where are they holding the prisoners? We have to find them. They're at the barracks, and so he gets Tamas and his powder mages, and we have Andrea, who is this bloodthirsty powder mage, and I just imagine him holding his rifle in a knuckle white grip, foaming at the mouth, saying, "I need to kill Kez, sir," and he's just jonesing for a fix. He's "You promised me I could kill Kez." And so he takes him and Vlora up, and then they're storming Nixlaus's bed and breakfast, manor home.
They go through this secret passageway that gets them right in, because Helana has this secret passage because she's lived there her whole life, I assume.
She was governess for 30 years.
Yeah, so she probably knows all the secrets. So yeah,
Yep.
they're able to get like right in behind enemy lines, and yeah, they're waiting for. I think they're waiting for Demacelin to do something at 6:00. There was like this discussion. It has to be at 6:00. You have to wait or whatever.
Yeah, they're providing a distraction so that he can free prisoners.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and essentially like they attack, and it's craziness. It's like at the end of book 1, there's this big battle of like, I feel like at least in book 1 and in book 2, both of these are ending with Tamas on a mission of vengeance to get this one person. So in book 1,
And it's the same person.
Oh, I thought it was the Archdicel, but I guess Niklaus was there as well.
Yeah, because
they
he
were both
takes his hands. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right. It is the same person. Yeah, that point skipped my head for a second. Yeah, so... But as we find out, so there won't be any Niklaus in book 3 because he does not make it out.
Yeah, so there's this big chase scene, and there's a bunch of wardens, and like Tamas is fighting the wardens, and Vlora fights the wardens, and Niklaus is constantly calling for his guards to attack Tamas, and he's running and running and running, and he gets in a carriage, and then Tamas just like goes full powder trance, and it's like he's running faster than a horse, and
Yeah, I think
he
he doesn't he take like a whole like powder horn and just like he just like
I think
he
it
like
was a
drinks
whole
the whole
powder
thing.
charge,
Yeah,
because
he like
usually
takes
he
the whole
just
thing.
yeah, he usually just sprinkles just a little bit on his tongue to like give himself an edge, but he's just going full powder mage. He's just like, nope. He knows when to bust it out. So so he chases Niklaus, who gets into a carriage. And he finally catches up, and the carriage he uses his third eye. He sees that Niklaus is in the carriage. And he goes and he has to kind of dig it out a little bit, I feel, because it's all raining and muddy, and he looks inside and he sees that Niklaus has broken his neck and like died in the carriage, and he opens his third eye again, and all the stuff from the else is gone. And so we wrote this together before the podcast, and then I just wrote this question, and we're gonna get Tyler's thoughts on it. Why do you think Brian McClellan killed Niklaus in the carriage accident and didn't let Tamas get his revenge?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question, and like the whole book is like building up to Tamas getting his revenge, and then in the end he doesn't get it, and it's kind of like it's almost like an anticlimactic ending, where you thought there was going to be like a final confrontation, and Tamas was going to be able to like say exactly what he wanted to say, and Niklaus is going to try and defend himself or whatever, and say his piece, and then Tamas is going to give Niklaus what he deserved. But yeah, I don't know. It's just maybe it's something along the lines of like you can search for vengeance all you want, but it probably, if you get it, it probably won't satisfy you.
Did you read my mind? You just stole like the words right out of my head.
We did not talk about this beforehand.
No, we did not. I just asked the questions because I was kind of thinking along those lines already. I was just like,
yeah,
I think it's a commentary on how the end result was the same. Niklaus was dead, so Tamas has quote unquote his vengeance, but he didn't get to carry it out, and it's like you said, it's like anticlimactic, but at the same time Niklaus is dead, and that's what Tamas wanted, but it's all kind of moot, and I think that's what Brian McClellan is trying to draw your attentions to. It's like you could be the big bad, you could go out and hurt someone to get what you want, but in the end, is it really is it any good doing it that way? I found it to be a little poignant, but so you just saying that was just articulating what I was what I was thinking myself about that situation.
Yeah, it's like does he want the justice, or does he just want the revenge for his own personal gain? Like he wants
way to phrase
like
it.
he wants to feel it himself. Like he wants to be the person to enact the punishment. He doesn't just want the true sense of justice to happen. It's like he wants to feel the power in a sense. I just remembered this like thing that I had highlighted when I was reading, and it was whenever they were I think it was whenever Gavriel and Tamas were at Caimnir's grave and they were talking. And he says, "That night we buried Caimnir is the night I decided to kill Manhooch." And then he says, "I decided to start a war, not for the people's rights or because Manhooch was evil or for any of the other drivel I tell my supporters. I started a war to avenge my wife and brother." So I think for this whole time, like, this has just been Tamas's like personal revenge story and his personal vendetta against people. And he doesn't have, as much as he wants to say that he has altruistic motives, like for the people or whatever, he really did it for himself. And so that's just really revealing for his character. And, you know, that's like his motivation. And at the end of the book, like, Tamas doesn't get to fulfill, you know, like that drive that he's had for the past 2 books to kill Nixlaus. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting way to end the book. It's not like it doesn't have the climactic ending, but it's certainly, I think it's a fitting ending for Tamas to learn a hard lesson potentially.
And it kind of like, do you feel like it's almost reminiscent of Taniel shooting Kresimir at the end of book 1?
In what way?
Like where there's like all this buildup, like a god is coming back to the planet, right. and then like Taniel just shoots him through the eye, and you're like,
yeah, go. Is that it?
Yeah, and then like, you know, there's this whole thing of him like coming back as like a half god, half ghost. He's like, the eye behind the flintlock,
and he's like half insane.
Fine. Yeah, he's like half insane. Like, yeah, you don't want that half insane person to be a god that you have to bow to.
Yeah,
that's why I like our God, the God of the universe, and his infinite wisdom and justice.
Yeah,
who can do no wrong.
I guess Brian McClellan is all about the anticlimax. He wants you to build up to some big thing, and then it's a slight twist on what you thought was going to happen at the end.
Yeah,
maybe.
But he does get his characters mad, and they do see red and get all ragey.
Hopefully at the end of book 3, since it's the end of the trilogy, we'll get a true climax that is fulfilling for the reader and for the characters that are involved. Because I feel like now it's kind of like, I mean, it's cool for us to read how like that will affect the characters in the story, but the characters themselves aren't getting that. Like, it's not like a win for them in their book, I guess you would say, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that's a good question. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Good chat. Yes, that's basically where we leave off with Tamas and the end of the book. Basically just ends off with basically there was the plot to like burn the town or burn the town to the ground, and so essentially they had put powder throughout the whole city and they were going to light it all up, and that was going to be how they burned the whole town down. And as they're trying to enact this plan, Tamas is trying to like control the powder explosions and make them smaller than what they could be, and that's really difficult to do, and he doesn't really succeed at it. And so there's this big explosion, and Tamas gets knocked out, and then he wakes up a little bit later in the aftermath, and he finds that the Deliv, is it the Deliv or the Deliv? The Deliv?
I think that the Deliv. That's how they pronounce it in the book.
The Deliv show up with all of their troops, and there's a funny scene where he wakes up and there's this guy sitting there. He's like, "Who the heck are you?" He's like, "I am Deliv." And then Tamas is like, "I want to know who you are, not where you're from, you fool." And then he's like, "Well, I am Deliv. I am the leader of the Deliv people, essentially." And Tamas is like, "Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I did not understand. It was just
Yep.
funny. Because Tamas is always the guy in power. He can always talk down to people. But in this scenario, he kind of gets to eat his words, which is good. It's good whenever Tamas can get knocked down a few pegs. He can be humbled a little bit. Sometimes I think Tamas is kind of on his high horse a little too much.
I kind of like, I feel like Tamas tries to be as humble as possible in some situations. Like, I like how, like, he doesn't take food before his soldiers.
That's
he
true.
will walk with his soldiers instead of riding his horse. Like, but he was saying, like, he's been injured and his leg was hurting, so he kind of needed to ride the horse. But, like, I just feel like he's putting a lot of people in front of him himself. I think he does that a lot. And then, like, when he rages on Nixlaus for killing his wife, like, you feel like his heart's in the right place. Like, you want to see him have that vengeance, but in reality, God doesn't want us to seek vengeance because we're supposed to trust in his infinite justice. Like, when someone is doing something wrong, like, we can see it and we can feel like we need to be the hands of God who, like, jump into that situation and correct that person, like, forcefully even, but we're supposed to trust in his sovereignty and his power and know that, like, that he will take care of it in the long run and we don't have to. And it helps us as Christians to stop being bitter and stop, like, wanting bad things to happen to bad people or people who are against us. Okay, so the leader of the Delev is with Tamas, and now Tamas has this huge supply train. He only has 2,000 fighters from the 7th and 9th who are ready to go, but he now has 50,000 Delevs, and they're all marching into Adro to fight off the Kez. And then at the very end of Tamas's timeline, a writer comes up and says that Adro is being put to the torch. And, if we look at that from the perspective of Adamat's story and we look at Lord Claremont and his landing, all the troops are starting to burn the churches, all the churches to Kresimir.
Yep.
And so that's probably what's being referenced to Tamas. But all Tamas knows is that there's fires and the heart of his country is being threatened. And so, I'm sure that leaves him, like, anxious and wanting to get back to Adro and Adapest as soon as he can.
Yep. Yeah. And that is where we end our story. We finally made it. At the end of book 2.
We did it.
We did it. Yeah, I mean, I did like this book. Did you like this story better or worse than book 1?
You always ask me this, and I always struggle because I always just I always enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I get it.
Let's see. I think I would say that I like the first book better. With all the, just all, learning the powder mages and, the privilege, and then there's, after you're oh, I know everything about this world, then there's, the pretty, you learn about that, then there's, a god, and there's, these reveals going on.
Yeah.
And this one, I found, the storylines just to be very interesting, stuck behind enemy lines, Taniel being, superhuman, and Adamat putting, Adamat and Lord Vetus going head-to-head, trying to figure out where Vetus is hiding and how to overcome all of Vetus's defenses. It's just an interesting story. And I find it different from the first book. But I really like the first book and, learning all the different, magical components of the society and
there's more mystery involved.
So yeah, I think I do like the first one a little bit better, but I also like this book because it's a journey that walking into it, you're just not expecting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I like this book a lot for the character development and just seeing where our characters are taken to different places and different situations, and we really get to see like their true colors. And then just our discussion with Tamas at the end of this story, like he doesn't get he doesn't get to have his vengeance in the end, and just seeing like what that's gonna do. Like, is that gonna free him from his like, will he have a breath of new life and have like new resolve or something, and will that make him a better character? Hopefully, because that person that he had so much rage against is now just out of the picture, and he doesn't have to think about that person at all anymore. So I did like this book. I agree with you. I think I like the first one a little bit better, but they were both pretty good. So hopefully he can stick the landing for book 3, and I'm excited to see like how everything ends. Even though I know there's another trilogy that happens after this, so there's more stuff that happens further on in the storyline, but this will be the end of the trilogy.
Yeah, it's the end of the trilogy, and like the second trilogy is like 10 years or something after this one. Okay. And it's mostly in Fatrasta.
Okay.
And that's all I'll say.
It's good.
And Fatrasta is like, just in case your memory's not serving you, it's like, I almost look at it as like America, because it's kind of like described as like a place that's being colonized by like a civil society. And it kind of, that's where Capole was found, and it's kind of has some backwater places. Oh, excuse me. It's getting late.
It is.
Time to wrap it up. All right. Tyler, book 3 predictions, go.
Book 3 predictions. I'm hoping, to see a lot of Bo going to get Joseph back from the slavers. I think that'll be cool. I want to see Bo. I want to see the Bo and Nyla power couple with Jakob. That's gonna be sweet. Nyla learning more about her powers will be really cool. I don't know. I think just seeing Tamas being relieved of that revenge will be interesting to see how his character goes. And I guess I'm not sure who like the big bad is going to be. I guess it's just going to be the Kez army, and Kresimir is the last big bad. There might be someone else who pops up that we'll figure out in that book specifically, but for right now, I guess it's just the Kez and Lord Claremont too. So I'm interested to see like what he's gonna be doing and what his kind of motives are. I guess, I don't know. I think Tamas will not be very happy to see his country being torched. So Tamas always takes care of business. So
there's not a time when Tamas doesn't take care of business.
It
might take him 10 years to plan a coup to behead the king, but he's going to take care of business.
Yeah, he'll get it done. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to the end of the series. And moving on to other different books and series. So if you have something you want us to read, or you think you'd like to see a discussion on, leave us a comment. You can also send us an email. I have an email address set up. It's pagesoflight@outlook.com. So if you want to send us an email, you can. Let us know what you want us to read, or if you like the podcast, or whatever. So the next episode we're going to be doing Bartimaeus,
Ring of Solomon, which is not part of the original series. There was an original trilogy, correct? And then Ring of Solomon came out a little bit later. So Ring of Solomon is a one-off standalone book. So we'll do that. And then if we like it, maybe we'll go back and do the original trilogy. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But that'll be the plan for the next 2 episodes, is Ring of Solomon. You can go pick up a copy and read it with us. We'll probably do the same thing. We'll read half the book and then do a podcast, and then read the second half and do another podcast. So that'll be our general plan.
As always, you can find out more about Pages of Light on our website. You can go to pagesoflight.com, and you can find us on all of the social media. You can subscribe on YouTube if you want to see the video version and see our faces and reaction to things as we chat. You can get to see Gabe with his Gandalf costume if you want to.
Yeah,
if you missed.
It got too hot. It had to come off real fast.
Yeah, I get it. But yeah, so you can go check out that on the YouTube, and we're also on all the other platforms or whatever. If you're on Goodreads, you can follow me if you want. You can see what I'm reading, and then I have a shelf that's marked for the podcast, so you can see what is coming up in the future. Yeah. If you also want to support us, you can review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, tell us why you like it, and also just share it with a friend if you like what you're listening to and you want to share it with somebody and have discussion with them about these books from a Christian perspective. Yeah, we welcome that, and having a community. So cool. Yeah. Any last thoughts, Gabe?
I'm excited for you to get into the Powder Mage Trilogy. It's a different entry point than like the first book. Sure. So I'm looking forward to this discussion next week.
Yes. We'll record next week.
And for you guys,
we'll be a little farther
next week. Yep.
Yeah, but for you, it'll be a
down
little
the line.
Yeah. So yeah, look forward to that. Thank you very much for watching or listening. Remember to keep reading and to share the gospel with somebody this week, and we will see you guys in the next episode. See you later.
Bye.